Hello, everybody. I am here today to talk a little about what is going on in this country, what, my goodness, is happening across America in the midst of this pandemic that we're in the midst of this situation with Breonna Taylor. And there are a lot of people right now who are angry and frustrated and hurting. And I just want to speak to it for a moment because I think that it is so important that in this country that we understand our need to participate, but also our need to have hope. So if you just give me 1 second, I want to share some information on this case, some political thoughts about how we ought to be, and also a message of hope. Because if we lose hope, folks, we lose everything. And so I just hope that we will retain that. So I've just got to set a few things up here on my social media to just make sure that we are sharing and that sort of thing. So anyway, okay, so first of all, good morning. I'm going to share I want to start by saying this morning that I was teaching a class of students yesterday in the city colleges. And hey, good morning, Hector. How are you, brother? I was teaching a group of students in the city colleges yesterday. And I had this 19-year-old student that begins to share about the Breonna Taylor case. And he's frustrated and he's angry. And he's talking, he's using profanity in class. And I'm like, oh, my goodness, we using profanity in class. What are you doing? We don't do that here. And, I thought about, man, this kid was frustrated because he felt like at the age of 19 that all he had seen in his lifetime were cases like Breonna Taylor's case in which justice was denied. And so for him, when you think about how a 19-year-old person, a young man, African-American male, I teach predominantly in the city colleges of Chicago. I teach predominantly African-American and Hispanic students. But also I have other students in my classes as well. I have people of European descent. I've got students of Asian descent as well. But the predominant number of students are of Latino or of also African-American descent. And I'm telling you guys, there is a loss of hope in this nation right now. What do I tell my students when they say to me, my life does not matter, and everything that I have seen in the American culture and society has reinforced that? What do I say to them, right? What do I say to them when they look and they see case after case, situation after situation in which they are hopeful, and then that hope is shot down? Let me share this. So here's what happened. So I talked to my student, and my job is to tell them to be engaged in the democratic process. My job is to inspire hope around the political process in America. And I'm telling you guys, that work is very hard because it is difficult for people to read the words in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then to see a disproportionate amount of people from particular backgrounds not receive that equality, not receive that freedom of life. It's interesting because even empirically, this whole question of whose life matters is data-driven. We know that when it comes to issues like the death penalty, issues like police interactions, we know for a fact that the race of the person that is engaging in these activities or engaging with the police is a key determinant factor as to whether they will be killed or receive heavy force. We know that in the death penalty situation, that the death penalty is meted out not based on the race of the perpetrator of the crime, but really the race of the victim. And we know that there are certain victims, and I learned this, by the way, in high school. I want to send a shout out to St. Joseph's High School out in South Bend, Indiana. I learned this from one of my coaches, Coach Sullivan, by the way, in our morality class at sophomore year of high school at St. Joe High School in Indiana, South Bend, Indiana. And I remember him talking, this is predominantly white high school, but I remember him talking about how the race of the victims was the key factor in whether the death penalty would get meted out or not, and that the largest probability of someone getting the death penalty was if they killed a person of European descent, particularly a female. And the least, right, and this was 25 years ago, we were talking about this, and the least likely person to receive the death penalty is someone that killed someone of color. These are things that have been entrenched in American society, entrenched in our culture, entrenched in our political system for 400 years, ladies and gentlemen. And so I know this is such a contentious topic, right? It's such a contentious topic because so many people don't want to see America like this. We want to see the beauty of America, and there's great beauty in America. We want to see the opportunity in America. There's great opportunity in America. But we have to recognize that America has never been great for millions and millions of people. And until we acknowledge that, accept that, and then push towards us getting there, we will never have the country that we could have. We are only as strong as our weakest link, folks. So that when you have community after community, city after city, where there are people who are living in a marginalized state in which they are just basically trying to survive, we cannot have a great country. Dr. King, I quote him all the time, said you cannot have a first-class nation with second-class citizens. So this Breonna Taylor case, so many people are upset. It took 191 days for them to come down with any kind of judicial ruling on this. We know the family was given $12 million as a settlement in a situation where people were not culpable for her death. Why are we paying out if there is no culpability? So what we want in America around these issues is cheap grace. We want to acknowledge, yeah, something was done wrong, yeah, we shouldn't have killed her, etc., but we're not going to be held legally accountable. And ladies and gentlemen, that's not right. Now, I have spent my morning and last night on some websites and places where the folks who are talking about this case don't agree with me. And I want to share about the other side for a second, because I think it's very interesting. I think it's very important for all of us to understand both sides of political arguments when we're having these discussions. And so here is what I've been reading that has been coming out of sort of the side of people who are okay, basically, with her death. The argument is that she was never an EMT. Okay, who cares? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to start bashing these already, but, like, who really cares? Okay, so that's one argument I've read, and they're painting this fake picture of her. Second argument was that the police actually did acknowledge that they were coming in. They have one witness that said that. There are 12 witnesses that said that did not happen. 12-1. Think about it. Now, I'm not, honestly, guys, here to talk through all the facts of the case, because I think that, honestly, they're doing it on MSNBC, they're doing it on CNN, they're doing it on Fox, they're doing it all these places. I'm just about the heart of this issue, but I think we got to deal with facts and empirical data. We got to understand what's going on. So that is happening as well. People are talking about that, right? And so the overwhelming number of witnesses are suggesting that there was no announcement that these folks were the police. Then the argument is that Breonna Taylor was involved with crime. She's got a criminal boyfriend, former boyfriend, not current boyfriend, because this guy, well, not current, obviously, unfortunately, at all now, but the gentleman that was there was not involved in any of this stuff, right? But this previous person, they say that she was partially under investigation, she was involved in the drug trade, that sort of thing, etc. You could besmirch her character all day long, you could go through that, but here is the point, right? Let's just say hypothetically, let's just say, although I don't agree with this, I don't believe this, but let's just say hypothetically Breonna Taylor was a criminal. Let's say hypothetically she was involved in the drug trade with her former boyfriend. Let's say hypothetically all these things are true and you could paint her as one of the worst human beings on earth. Does it give the police the right to kill her in an extrajudicial fashion? That's the question. And if it does, what country is this? Last time I checked, the place in the world that is doing that is the Philippines. They're doing extrajudicial killings around their drug trade, and they're doing it because they believe that if they just kill people without trial, without jury, that they could fix their drug issue. And you know who, by the way, our president has praised them for this, guys. This is very scary if you think about it. The issue of her character does not matter. I think, honestly, by the way, there's a lot of lies about her character, but this does not matter. And anyone who would bring that up, honestly, is a part of the problem. The issue around this is in the United States of America in 2020, will people get a trial? Will they get a jury? Or will the police have the ability to kill people without due process of law? That's the real question. Now, we also understand that the gentleman, another argument that I've heard on some of these right-leaning news sources and that sort of thing, is that her boyfriend shot at the police first. Okay. Honestly, guys, if someone breaks into your house in the middle of the night, they're unannounced. He said, by the way, on the 911 call, he says, hey, somebody broke into my house, so I shot. He didn't say the police broke into he said someone broke into my house, so I shot. In fear, in terror, he shot. What the heck do you think is going to happen? In a culture that praises guns. Which to me, by the way, is a whole other issue in America, guys, this gun-loving, gun-toting culture, because we as Americans, guys, we have this cowboy mentality that every one of us ought to have guns, protect ourselves, shoot, ask questions later. And I'm not saying that is him, but I'm saying that is the American culture. And you have to understand there's a consequence to that. We have the most gun violence of any industrialized nation in the world by far. I'm not going to get into this. I've done 100 videos on this question, on this issue, but you can't have your cake and eat it too in America, guys. We cannot have a heavily armed citizenry and not expect people to be getting shot left and right in all kinds of situations and all kinds of circumstances. And so we got to talk about that culture too, but I'll do that later. But I want to speak to people right now who have no hope in the political process, have no hope. I've talked to people who said, man, Obama's in office, nothing changed. Trump's in office, it's the same. That there's no hope about voting. There's no hope about the society. There's no hope about justice. I want to speak to you right now and help to give you just maybe a word of encouragement, maybe a word that would give you some perspective in the midst of this. Bishop Desmond Tutu said that hope is being able to see that there is light despite all of the darkness. We are living in very dark times, folks. We just passed 200,000 people dying from the coronavirus pandemic. We are living in the most racially tumultuous time that we've had in this country since the 1960s. We are dealing with a president that bragged about his support for eugenics in a rally in Minnesota just a few days ago. If you guys don't know what eugenics is the idea in the early 1900s, race scientists came up with this idea that that certain people ought to be bred and others would not. The word eugenics literally means good birth. I'm a part of a film called Human Zoos. If you check it out on YouTube or a couple other places by the Discovery Institute, in which I play a minister in 1910 who argued against eugenics. There was a guy by the name of Oda Binga who was an African who was kidnapped from the west coast of Africa and put in a zoo in Brooklyn, New York. And they said that he was the missing link between in Darwin's theory of evolution. And so he was African. And the idea was that people of color are innately inferior in the endowments of body and mind, right? So this is the race science that exists that had been very damaging, so much so that the eugenicists used the American race science to push what Hitler was doing in Germany. So the folks in Germany came to the American race scientist and go, oh, well, we need science to back up our public policy. We'll get it in America. This is our history, folks. And this is our present. So when our president comes to a rally this week in September of 2020 and says to people, I believe you guys have good genes and those genes really matter. And, you got folks coming in who are refugees and they don't have the same genes as us and this sort of thing. He is hearkening back to race science. You have to understand history. You understand what clearly is happening. These are not funny things. These are there. This is not a joke. This is not something to be taken lightly. I heard the old phrase that when someone shows you who they are, you ought to believe them. Our president has shown us who he is over and over and over and over again. If you have not seen it now, I believe, unfortunately, you're part of the problem. Unfortunately, and I don't mean to be, rude or whatever to folks. I love everybody, but if you cannot see what has happened in this country, maybe we got a decent stock market. Woo, wow. If we have a civil war, it doesn't matter. If we have a president that continues to tear apart this nation by his words and his deeds, who cares where the stock market is? It won't matter because we will have such unrest and violence in this country that those minimal gains in the stock market that we're continuing to brag about will mean absolutely nothing. So, having said all that, we have to find a reason to have hope. We've got to find a reason to have belief that this system is worth investing in. And I'm going to tell you guys very clearly that even in the midst of this, I still feel on paper, America has something good to offer the world. Because on paper, there is equality. On paper, there is justice. And we've got to continue to press. There is not justice in this case. Now, I'm not suggesting what should have happened, by the way. I mean, I think it's presumptuous for all of us as sort of Monday morning quarterbacks who were not there to just go in and go, oh, man, it should have been this, that. However, let me say this. Common sense tells us that when someone kills someone else in the line of duty and that person was innocent, there ought to be some accountability for it. That's common sense. You could go through all the details of the case all day and still that principle lasts and it's very clear. And that is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about some accountability, manslaughter, something. That's what people are upset about. And these kinds of protests, by the way, are not coming out of nowhere, folks. People are upset. There are millions of people that are hurt and that are angry, and it makes sense. It makes sense because there are many people in this country that believe, man, I will have equality one day if I just do the right things, if I just go to school, if I just da-da-da-da-da. And when things like this happen, it is heartbreaking because it means that no matter what you do, that you could be in a situation like that would deny you access to equal protection under the law. That is what this is about. But we have hope because we have an election coming up. And yes, there's an electoral college, and I'll do a video on that too or whatever, but we have an election coming up and there's a possibility of change. We have hope because the election is not just about the presidency, but it's about localities. And yes, your voice does matter heavily at the local level. We have hope because we have a level of free speech in this country. The fact that I can get on and talk about these things and the government is not trying to kill me as a result means that there is a source of hope in this country. So what I'm saying is, ladies and gentlemen, is that it is dark. And there's a lot to be sad about this week in America. But I also believe that if we continue to fight, if we continue to believe, and we continue to press forward, change can come. And I have seen change happen in my lifetime in history, and I can see change happening even as we speak. There are things in this country that are different. The spirit is different than it was even 5 years ago. So we are sorry to Breonna Taylor and her family. We are sorry that there is not justice in this case. But we are hopeful and prayerful that if we continue to work, that there will not be another Breonna Taylor. And let me say this, because I'm going to close out in a second here, but I want to say this as well about this criminality issue, because I think there's this cloud hanging over, these cases, and we always go to, man, this person, Jacob Blake, they were involved in some crime, this person, they were involved in some crime. Let me explain something to you. The problem of crime in our communities in America, and poor communities in America, and marginalized communities in America is America's problem collectively. It is not the Democrats' problem. It is not Chicago's problem. It's America's problem. It's America's failure. And true leadership would understand that and then address it in a way that helps us understand that we are all in this together. Any American that wants to spend their time blame shifting and talking about, oh my gosh, it's so dangerous over in that part of town, I'm glad I don't live over there, these stupid folks who allow the lawlessness, etc. Folks, this is our problem collectively. Where there is no justice, there is no peace. And that is what we are seeing. So I want you guys to have hope. I want you to believe that even though we are in a dark time, that things can get better. And I hope that we will stay involved and we will press and we will vote and we will be concerned with other people. We will love other people and we will try to walk outside of our own shoes and try to have our lives have value, not just by what we want and what we do, but that our lives would have value based on how we serve and treat somebody else. That is the greatest indication of a person's character and their life and their impact on this earth. And when times are dark, we have a great opportunity to show the light. Thank you guys. Have a great day. And let's continue to pray for Breonna Taylor and her family. Let's continue to pray for this country. But after we pray, let's get up and let's work. Take care.